This is a very early version of the Dusty Miller from Francis book, A Book on Angling. Marvin Nolte did a slight variation of this fly in Judith Dunham's book, The Art of the Salmon Fly. He leaves out the mallard, which is not a bad idea. I'll be using white dyed turkey on this fly, dyed emerald and lavender, although it's not a true lavender. It's as close as I could come with what I had. I hope that the little bit of marrying I'm going to show here will be helpful. The wing I'm showing was a wing I initially did for a 2/0 fly. Then I changed my mind and decided to go 4/0. So I married a completely different wing for that. Although it's got the exact same principles, just 6 per section instead of 5 per section that I did on the 2/0. You'll get the idea when you watch a little of this. It's fairly simple. Start by cutting 3 strands from the lavender feather. One of the strands will wind up on the bottom of the fly, and the other 2 will put on the top of this first stage here. So we're going to want 1, and then we're going to want 4 on this particular fly. So I'll cut 4 strands from the left side of the emerald feather. Keep in mind, we're only dealing with lefts right now. We're making up the near wing. So you're going to be cutting all these strands from the lefts. Now I'm going to marry the 2 together. And what we'll do here, single strands are very difficult to marry in and of themselves. So what we'll do is we'll strip off 2 of the strands of lavender and just put them right on top of the emerald. So starting from the bottom, the lavender is going to go 1, and then it's on the very next stage, it'll be 2 strands. And then on this stage after that, it'll be 3 strands, and so forth. And I'm only going to show a part of marrying this wing just so you get the idea. Now the emerald will go backwards from this. It starts with 4, and then the very next section of emerald is going to be 3. It's going to go down in count. So we're going to get 3 strands here. And I got 4. Not a problem. We'll just strip one of them off. We'll marry that. Now remember, we had 1, 2, so our next set of lavender will be 3. So on this wing, each section containing 2 colors has a total of 5 strands in it. Now the wing I did for the 4/0 fly had 6 strands per section. And on this particular set of wings, I just carried it out until I had 5 lavender on top. So there's 3 lavender. Now keep in mind, the emerald is going down in count, so we had 4, 3, and the next set will be 2. As far as matching the tips, I'm just trying to get them more or less even, maybe with a slight taper to the ends, but not much. Once I finish the left wing or near wing, I will do a corresponding right wing, and then we'll be ready to start the fly. Tie in one side of a piece of gut starting underneath the hook and then winding up on the side. Next, double the gut back, forming an eye, and start to bind it down to the rear. Take 2 or 3 wraps back and then verify that the gut is level with the hook shank. Then hold it underneath the shank and bind down the rest of the way. We want the rear of this to be underneath the hook. At least that's the way I've been doing it recently. Get out the crazy glue. You don't have to use crazy glue. In fact, you don't have to put any glue on this if you don't want to. I just like to secure the gut. This will be the last glue I use on the fly until the head. As you can see towards the rear of the tie down, there's a bit of a lump, but we'll take care of that later. This is from George Kelson's Salmon Fly. Round out the eye with your scissors. The point of the hook should extend about halfway into the eye. Next, I build a tapered body with GSP 220 thread. I won't show that. This is Benecki 50 denier that I'll replace the 220 with. And after I wind a body with 220, I always finish up with 50. And the reason I do that is it just works better for tying things in. It's a little more secure, bites in a little better. It also makes the underbody smoother. Notice that I've posted the thread over the crook of the barb. Not the end of the barb and not the point of the hook. In between, right there. This is where we'll start our tag, which consists of fine oval tinsel. I've stripped out a bit of it, leaving just the core, but I'm tying in some of the metal, and I'm doing this on the far side of the hook. You want to get some of the metal, otherwise it will tend to separate. And I'm going to wind a 5-turn tag on this. It can be 3, 4, 5. This is a 4/0 Gaelic Supreme hook, so it's a fairly decent size. So 5 turns of tag is not a bad thing. Here I'm backing off the thread just to keep the bulk down and tying in the tag end of the tinsel forward. And I'm being careful to tie everything underneath the hook. And cutting off the butts. Notice my thread is now posted short of the point of the hook. And that's where I'm going to tie in my floss. And I'll be winding the floss back to the tinsel and then forward again. Right here, I'm stroking the floss to even up all the fibers. And I also got that from George Kelson's Salmon Fly. The old books are just terrific for finding various techniques to help you tie these. And they're all available online. I'll list some of the important ones below in the description. I'll give you links to them. They're all free. You can get them all in PDF format. Again, I backed off the thread, and now I'm tying in the floss tag end. Binding it down forward with a few wraps, and then I'll cut the butts here. Many times at this point, I'll go all the way to the front of the fly with the thread and then back, but in this case, I don't. I flatten the thread and take it back to the floss. This is an agate stone burnishing tool. I got this from John McLean at feathersmc.com. The tying in of the tail is next, but first we need a measurement of the hook gap. In this case, it's 15 millimeters. I'm taking this measurement so I can properly select a golden pheasant crest tail. The length of the tail from tie-in to tip, measured diagonally, should be 1.5 times the width of the gap. In this case, that'll be about 22 millimeters. I got that rule of thumb from Ron Alcott's book, and it's a good one. Marvin Nolte showed me this method of prepping a tail. The first thing you do, and we're looking at this tail from behind, is crimp the stem right at basically the tie-in point. And then if your feather has a lot of curve, which this one does, crimp the first third of the back of the stem with your thumb as shown here. This will straighten out the feather and open up the fibers. Tie the stem in with 3 loose wraps. Get it situated exactly the way you want it, right on top of the hook. Make sure it's straight. And then tug some of the root of the feather underneath your 3 wraps. Verify that it's straight, and then bind the rest of the stem down. You can cut some of the stem off as I do here. The tugging of the root under the thread wraps is wonderful because it stabilizes the tail. I used to have a lot of problems with the tail moving as I would tie in other sections of the fly, and this totally prevents that. Tie in the ostrich hurl for the butt with the flues angling upward. In other words, the stem will be on the bottom as you tie it in. That way when you wrap it, the stem will lead, which is what you want. As you can see here, there's the stem in the front leading the way. What that will do is promote a nice, tight, and compact butt. And again, tie off underneath the hook. Cut it. I took it all the way forward and then all the way back. Right here I'm tying in the oval gold tinsel. And as you can see, I've gotten some of the metal. And I'm just holding it with 2 wraps right now. 2 turns of thread. And as you can see, I've prepped the flat embossed tinsel by cutting the end on a diagonal. And here I've wrapped the flat tinsel, and now I'm wrapping the rib, the oval gold tinsel. And try to keep these, it's difficult when you've got wide space turns like this. We're trying for 5 turns of tinsel, which is a custom. Try to get them spaced as evenly as you can, then tie off on the side of the hook. I trap the tinsel and then do 2 or 3 more wraps, just trying to keep the bulk around the head down as much as I can. Bind back to where the flat tinsel was tied off. We get ready to put on a hackle. I tie most things on, if I'm not tying off on the far side of the, tying in on the far side of the hook, I use the right angle technique. And my goal is always to have things bound down underneath the hook. And that's just for aesthetics. I always fold the hackle when it's after it's tied in. It's just much easier to do than trying to fold it ahead of time. But you can fold it ahead of time if you prefer, and if you decide you want it more sparse, you can strip one side of it. If you're tying the hackle in by the tip, and you should always be tying in by the tip on a wet fly of any kind, strip off the left side of the fibers and the feather. The length of the hackle is there are no hard and fast rules about it. Before I tie it in, I'll try to get it to. I'll try to tie it in so that it goes maybe halfway, a third of the way to halfway back to the point of the hook. It's not well defined, certainly. At least not in my mind. I've seen all kinds of things in the old books as far as hackle length is concerned. And here I'm changing over to black thread right now. And that's because all the materials that come from here on are dark. So I want the thread underneath to be dark as well. There's another stray. I like to get the hackle out of the way as much as possible so that when I mount the underwing, I've got a clean, more or less flat surface on which to mount it. If there's a lot of hackle in the way, it can cause problems. And it can really kick the underwing up even more than it naturally wants to do. This has got a golden pheasant tail underwing. And as you'll see, it's difficult to keep this wing down. It wants to pop right up almost no matter what you do. It's very difficult material to hump, which is one way of keeping a wing down. You just have to do the best you can. Here I'm letting the thread naturally slide down the slope. And now I'm going to pull up on the bobbin to gradually tighten the loop that I've created. So I've got maybe 1.5 to 2 turns of thread on this thing. And now I'm going to straighten it up. You don't want to go too far forward with your thread wraps. I try to keep everything within maybe 4 or 5 thread wraps. If you go too far forward, the wing will really kick up then. And you'll find that as you tie on other stages after this, the wing will tend to kick up because of the pressure on the butts that are left forward. I will typically cut the butts off on the underwing. Not always. It depends on a lot of factors. In this case, it just made sense. Make sure your underwing is straight and perfectly vertical. Otherwise, the overwing will never go on. Now I'm getting my overwings ready to tie in. This is my married wing. I spend a lot of time up front getting it situated just the way I want. When this is tied in, I want it straddling about the top third of the hook shank, not much more. Here I'm creating a V. I lift up on the butts a little bit, create a V, and then try to let the thread slide down naturally into the V. That doesn't happen here, so now I'm gradually crushing my fibers by taking the bobbin up while holding both the wings and the butts. Now, many times when you mount a wing, things will split and so forth and so on and not look right, and panic sets in, but don't panic. You can fix many things after the fact. Right here, I'm going to pull back on the wing slightly because I noticed I had a forward lean on the thread wraps. So there's lots of things you can do after the fact. You can even hump the wing more after the fact if that's what you want to do. Right here, part of this underwing is separated. I'm going to try to marry it back. There's lots of stuff you can do. So it has to be fairly disastrous for you to give up and try remounting. You can mount a wing, I'm going to say up to about 10 times, really trying to make it right. Depending on the wing, depending on a lot of factors. But you can steam the fibers in between, etc. Right here, I'm trying to get a little bit of curve out of the front of the wing. I think this wing will work, and I'm going to now tie the teal sides on. I've taken the thread back to the wing, and I've taken 2 turns forward to hold the near teal side on. Then I'm going to tie the far teal side in with 2 wraps back to the wing. You want to minimize wraps as much as you can from here on out. Right there, I'm trying to even up the two teal sides. And now I'm gonna tie in the jungle cockeye, and I've prepped these not by stripping the stem, but by cutting the fibers very close to the stem with scissors. That gives the thread something to kind of hold on to. And I learned that from the Price Tannett book, How to Dress Salmon Flies, which I think is some of the best instruction for modern day tying. Now I'm going to tie in the far jungle cockeye. You can see the little sawtooth edges there. Again, now I'm going 2 turns back towards the wing. Just the way I tied in the sides. The whole idea here is to minimize thread wraps around the head as much as you can. It's not always easy. Still got that little bit of curve up in the front of the wing I'm trying to deal with. Tightening everything up. And we'll do more adjusting as time goes on. Things will tend to move from here on out on you, and you just have to keep after it, keep adjusting, play with it, mess with it, get it looking the way you want. Now I'm going to tie on the mallard roof, and there's 3 ways of doing this. I'm going to do it what I think is the easiest way, and start out with something about twice as wide as you want per side, and then take that feather and fold it lengthwise in half. On many flies, I'll cut all the butts before I mount the roof. I think it makes it a little easier. Get it centered very well up towards the front of the fly. Get it so it's sort of straddling the wing. Take a couple of pretty easy wraps here. Then you need to hold the front of the wing while you stroke this down, because the wing will want to crush down. So this is a delicate operation here. And that's why this technique, which is the easiest of the 3 techniques that I know of to mount these wings, it's the easiest, and it's still no stroll in the park. If you have something sticking up in the back, what I did there is I just wet a tool I have. You can use your finger and stroke it down. Now, I didn't like that roof, and I put on a whole nother one. Just so you know, I like a wider roof, and that one wasn't quite wide enough for my taste. Now, instead of wrapping a front hackle on this, which is fraught with peril, I'm going to tie this hackle on sort of DFO style. More or less. I don't know. This is kind of something I've devised myself to get this on. It's not quite the DFO method exactly. What I've done here is I've stripped out a wide section of guinea off of a feather, off of one side of a feather, tied it in on the bottom. There are many ways of dealing with this front throat hackle. This is just one. Now, I've done a lot of prep work on this topping. It's a golden pheasant crest topping. I've sized it. I've flattened the stem. I've bent the stem. And I'm tying it in by the stem only. And I've done a lot of playing with this that you didn't see off camera. And the thing you need to do is just make sure that before you ever put the topping on, that it's going to sit on there well. Just lay it on there and see if you think it's going to work. And then if that's the case, and you can always manipulate the front curve of the topping as well with your thumb and middle finger. You can manipulate the curve by crimping, just as we did the tail. You can add curve or take curve away. I'm showing all of this trimming because there's so many things that can go wrong right here. First of all, you need to hold on with your left hand throughout this process. Otherwise, things will move around. You'll have all kinds of problems. So you're gripping it fairly tightly. You don't want to be too sweaty when you do this because the jungle cock eyes will stick to your fingers. When you remove your fingers, the jungle cock will pull out. So be careful of that. Make sure your hands are nice and dry before you do this. Then little by little, trying not to cut the eye or the thread, trim things up. I have a special pair of very small scissors. They're ocular scissors of some sort. You can use cuticle cutters for this. The first time I used mine, I cut the eye off the fly, and I've never used them since. You can, some guys use a cautery tool, which is a great way to set fire to your fly tying room. I kind of do it the hard way here, little by little with scissors. Take a lot of time doing this. This is where it can go horribly wrong. And the next part of this, I'm not going to show. Throw some glue on the thread. Take very diagonal wraps and work the thread down to the eye, and then wrap it back up with glue still on the thread. Then let the thread dry and whip finish up at the top. You can whip finish down at the bottom if you want, if you have enough coverage. In this case, I didn't. I plan to do an entire video just on finishing the fly, which can be very challenging. If you'd like to do an easy version of this, marry strips of golden pheasant tail to the bottom of the wing. Don't do an underwing on it. And leave out the mallard roof, and it will be a much easier fly to accomplish. Above all, have fun.